Uber, Bitcoin, self-driving cars. Combine those three together, and you have the self-owning taxi. A car that is a corporation that owns itself, pays for the car lease, the car insurance, and the gasoline from the revenues it makes, giving passengers a ride, and there's not a single human involved in that matter.
Welcome to Key Stock and Crypto Channel.
And the beginning of October, we had stocks pumping. And like I told you, beginning of October, we should be fine. But towards the end, we're going to be moving down because we know the Fed is going to continue on raising rates. Now we have the Fed comes out and says they're not done yet. And there's a lot of media that's saying that the Fed is going to pivot. Because we know they've been doing this for over 15 years. They just kept expanding the bubble. But we know that was all for a reason, so they can come in with the new digital economy. And speaking of the digital economy, we have the Treasury Department Financial Stability Oversight Council warns that cryptocurrencies could threaten the safety of the U.S. economy. And why are they saying this, guys? Because we know the strong dollar is hurting the emerging markets. They're already making plans to get off the dollar. But we know this was all part of the plan. Now we have energy stocks climb on reports of OPEC. Now, guys, they're going to meet on the 5th. What also happens on the 5th, we have that additional small value repo to help manipulate yields. So it'll make us look good for a little while. But we know we're running into an energy crisis that was created. Now, guys, we have Waymo driverless trucks in Texas. And it's not going to make your news. They're not going to constantly repeat in the media that automation is slowly taking over. The fourth industrial revolution is going to take about 2 to 3 years to build, but guys, it's definitely coming. Now, because the dollar is so strong around the world, we have Mexico halting some food exports and has agreed with firms like Walmart to cut prices on 24 basic goods by 8%. So guys, remember, the fourth industrial revolution is uncharted territory. But that's the reason why the central banks are still holding on to liquidity and creating safety nets. So while the old legacy market is going out and the new fourth industrial revolution is coming in, the people will have a painless transition. And remember what Jerome Powell kept saying. We're going to be moving over to a new economy, and I'm afraid some people are going to be left behind. Now we have Jim Cramer says that Apple is still the greatest stock of all times. And we know Jim Cramer loves the pump and dump Apple. He's actually on video admitting it. We know Apple is going to take a hit because they rely so much on the emerging markets. Now we have South Korean Naver to buy U.S. e-commerce site Poshmark for $1.2 billion. And guys, what are we saying? A lot of consolidation. And the founders of these companies know what's about to happen. And that's the reason why they're willing to take a lower price and run with the money, run in the sunset. Now we have Solar Cycle partners with Sunrun to recycle and reuse old solar panels. And I'm not your financial advice, not financial advice. Please do your own research. But guys, we know the push for clean energy is part of the fourth industrial revolution, and Sunrun has pretty good numbers. But we know there's going to be a lot of consolidation in the space. Now we have Rivian, the EV maker. We know well off the lows. All the EV stocks took a hit, but their production grew 67%. And we know they have a big hidden hand right behind them, and that is Amazon. Also, we have GM sales rose 24% in the third quarter. And we know both of those are going to be big players in EV, Ford. These big companies are not going anywhere when it comes to the car makers. But lastly, guys, getting over into the indicators, we have yields down. We had the dollar down, and of course we had the VIX down, which spelled the market pumping. And don't forget, just because we're in a bear market, we're still going to have pumps and dumps. But guys, that's all I have for you. Have a wonderful day.
Oil jump. This morning as OPEC Plus mulls a cut in production. Our Brian Sullivan has more on this. And Brian, this is a big story that's been kind of roiling markets over the weekend.
Well, it roiled my weekend. I will say that, Becky, because you wake up Saturday morning and you find out that OPEC has decided after 2.5 years to do their next meeting in person in Vienna, Austria. Of course, they have been remote and virtual since COVID began, kind of doing these monthly Fed-like meetings. They kind of dropped the bombshell on everybody on Saturday and said, yeah, we're going to do it in person, which has led to all kinds of speculation about why. What exactly are they going to do that on short notice they're going to just basically ask every global oil journalist and analyst to drop what they're doing and get to Vienna? The idea is that there's probably going to be a cut anywhere. Listen, it depends on who you listen to. 500,000, a million, 1.5 million barrels a day. There is likely a big cut coming. The question is, of course, how much and for how long, as it always is, Becky. The other question is, on Wednesday in Vienna, Austria, will the Russians, Alexander Novak, will they be there in person? Obviously, sanctions on the West. Is there some sort of diplomatic immunity that would enable the Russian Confederation to actually show up at the OPEC headquarters in Vienna? Will the cut be 1 million plus barrels a day? All these questions are now floating out there, leading to a lot of speculation. But U.S. politicians, Becky, well, at least one of them is not happy about this. Ro Khanna, Democratic congressman from outside of the Bay Area in San Francisco, effectively coming out on Twitter and saying, we will stop selling planes and arms to the Saudis if they make some big oil cut. That coming from Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna. I'm not going to read the whole thing, it'd take too long, but there's your basic thing. So, Becky, we're starting to see this heat up, this battle already between certain members of Congress. Of course, they've got very high gas prices in California. And what OPEC's got to do, I think we have this midterm election coming up in the next month. I may have heard about that. This is going to be the October 5th surprise. We're going to find out, Becky. Either way, a lot of intrigue suddenly around OPEC in just 2 days' time.
Apple's at the root of everything. As the largest company in the world, it's always front and center. The stock's decline until today has become synonymous with the decline of the entire market. That's why it was so depressing to read this morning's note from Morgan Stanley, of all places, along one of the biggest bulls on Apple, about how the App Store seems to be performing poorly, with a 5% revenue decline in September, worst in the history of the company. The culprit? The collapse of the Chinese economy, and yes, indeed, the slowdown in gaming. I say not so fast. Last week, we were told that the problem with Apple was a lack of orders to its suppliers. Seems like the new phone, the 14, has too much inventory. Yep, we heard that Apple's backing down from more aggressive ordering because the demand just isn't there. But then this morning, Evercore says that lead times have just expanded, adding the parenthetic, not a typo. In fact, demand for the 14 Pro and the Pro Max is so strong that you're currently looking at delivery times around the end of October or early November. And that includes China.